Katatonia is a terrific example of a band that started off with one idea in mind and slowly but surely evolved into what would make them legendary. All of the eras this band has been able to display have had a high level of quality. However, the Katatonia that we know now was not the Katatonia that began back in the early 1990s. They were a markedly different band, one that embraced a different approach. But there's 10 studio albums within their discography, and the band that has come is one that has become embraced as a sort of underground hero that has been named alongside bands such as Opeth as a significant group for the past 20 years or so. But let's take a look at these 10 albums individually. Let's see which are the best and which are the not so best. I can't say the word worst here, because like so many of the bands that we talk about in this series, there are no wrong answers whenever it comes to Katatonia. You can pick up any one of these albums and sample it for the very first time and get an idea of what this band is all about. The only difference is that with some, you may hear something very different than the others. So let's count down from 10 to 1 and let's rank them all Katatonia. And number 10 is Night is the New Day. Now this is a terrific album. This is a late 2000s disc that had a lot going for it, but it's one that whenever you look back at this most recent era, it does have some fundamental flaws. It has a great sense of itself and the songwriting is very powerful. It embraces the dark metal sound that Katatonia has become so very well known for. However, whenever you put it in comparison to some of the others within their discography, this is one that feels like it just doesn't lend itself to as much memory as some of the others, despite the fact for some out there, this is no doubt their favorite of all of the Katatonia albums. It's still dark and moody and is able to do its thing, but for me, at least, it's number 10. These lists, after all, are a bit subjective, and something has to be at the bottom, despite us really wanting it to be. Number 9 is Discouraged Ones, and this was almost a metaphor for the band itself, considering this was a group that was experiencing a transformation and was not too sure what was going to happen. As a result of some shenanigans in the 1990s, the band did have to change and carve out a brand new identity, which did cause a lot of unease as to what was going to happen. However, Discouraged Ones is a great clarion call to what this band was going to become with albums that would follow it. However, this one does show some of the unease and some of the confusion that can come with any sort of transformation or transition. Number 8 is Dead End Kings. Yet another more recent album that has a lot going for it. Its songwriting is extremely tight, and this band continues to show how dark moodiness is just really right up their alley. This album was able to showcase so many other different things as well, that this was a band that could modernize a little bit and would further modernize later on in the decade, which is the 2010s. This is a great album, and it's one that does have some sentimental favorites, but this is an album overall that, when comparative to some of the other stalwarts in their genre, or in their discography, it's just, this is where it ends up. Nothing knocking that, it's just where it is. Number 7 is Viva Emptiness. This was a hard one to put so low, considering this was what brought me into the Katatonia fold, not some of the classics that preceded it that we'll talk about later. This was an interesting album to me, considering I heard some of the rumors about this band and how they were really starting to craft some master classes in moody music, and this album certainly showcased that. Viva Emptiness has a couple of my favorite songs from this band, such as A Premonition, either that or Omerta, that I still play to death to this day. And it's an album that's able to showcase a lot of tact while also trying to embrace heaviness from time to time. That trademark voice that we hear hasn't changed, it feels like, in 20+ years, but it still is something where this album had a couple of confusing elements, such as the somewhat imbalanced delivery that we got from it. But it's still an excellent release, and one that brought me headfirst into Katatonia. Number 6 is Last Fair Deal Gone Down. Very similar to Viva Emptiness, this one has sentimental favorites, but also does have a little bit of a conflict whenever it comes to its overall flow, which does keep it from entering into the top 5. But this is still considered to be one of Katatonia's important late 1990s discs. This is post-transformation, so folks were starting to become accustomed to and really grow to enjoy what the new version of Katatonia was able to deliver. And this disc was one that was able to help embrace more fans and bring them into the fold, so it's a very important album within their discography, though not the best. Number 5 is Dance of December Souls. We're going all the way back to an iconic debut from Katatonia that was a markedly different sound, one that embraced the snowy darkness of death/black metal or heathen metal, whatever you wish to call it. And this was a band that sounded incredibly different. The growls on here are absolutely fantastic. These are long tracks that almost have doom metal capability despite not having all of the requirements for that genre. This has a lot to offer and shows a band that had very different ambitions whenever they began as opposed to what they have become. This is a really important step in their evolution, and it's also something that was very commonplace for the time, with bands such as Paradise Lost as well as Anathema embracing similar ideas before transitioning into what their current sounds are able to really replicate and show from this group. And even a band like My Dying Bride was showing more of these trademark elements as opposed to what we would get 10 years later with Turn Loose the Swans or albums of that distinction. Dance of December Souls is seen as absolutely legendary and a showcase as to why the genre of death metal and all of its different variations were extremely hot during this time. This wasn't trend hopping, this was making the trend. Number 4 is The Great Cold Distance, a more modern album from the 2000s that showed this band at really the peak of their second revolution. An album such as Viva Emptiness was able to give the band a lot of press, considering heavy metal was starting to make a sincere comeback and Katatonia was getting recognized. But The Great Cold Distance was the album that fully gave them their second awakening, and this disc has a lot of great things going for it in order to really display that. A song such as My Twin being a great example. But then there were some of the things that we got after the fact, with a track such as Unfurl that was not even on this disc but was released right around that same time, that helped boost up the legend of this band and craft a lot of interest in them, not only from metalheads that perhaps had passed them by, but a brand new generation and even just some individuals that wanted to sample a song. This was easily one of their most fruitful moments and an album that certainly bears all of the terrific successes that it has been able to provide for this band. Number 3 is The Fall of Hearts, the most recent Katatonia album, and one that actually decided to go a little bit different in its whole philosophy. For many years they had embraced sort of this idea of shorter songs, anywhere between 3 to 5 minutes, and really compressing themselves with their darkness and their moodiness. But with The Fall of Hearts, they go even more dark. They even embrace a little bit of a doom philosophy. It almost sounds like they want to go back to all those trademark growls and some of the things that made them initially a name, and they do so with a great songwriting capacity. They go outside of their realm, and it really worked for them. As a result, The Fall of Hearts feels like a modern-day Katatonia classic, one that is able to showcase this band right before they went on a slight hiatus, and which I think we're still a part of, and we definitely hope that they come back soon if The Fall of Hearts is any indication. Definitely an album that didn't necessarily come out of left field and surprise us, but still felt like a nice treat. Number 2 is Brave Murder Day. Now, am I a bit biased toward this disc because Michael Akerfit from Opeth is on it? Not really, actually, because the music itself is just tremendous. This is a somewhat conceptual-seeming disc, which has a real interesting flair to it. I love the fact that they still maintain that death metal style on this. The deep growls of Mike are really able to help this out and give them a boost. It's a real collaborative effort, and that's a really neat thing. I like just what this album presents, regardless to whom it was that was actually behind the microphone. This is just a cool idea. This is whenever the band knew that the transition was going to come, that things were going to have to change if this band was to stay alive. And they were able to give the fans a real treat of a second album that feels like it is just slopped with history, considering all of the different things that were to come afterward. This is a great album, one that if you want to hear that darker side, that more death metal related side of Katatonia, is an excellent introduction, and then you should immediately go and listen to Dance of December Souls and get your full treat. But number 1 is Tonight's Decision. This is a late 90s album that has a terrific overall package, and it has, again, sentimental favorites, but also the way in which this album is completely put together is just magical. I love the moody atmosphere. I know I've said that word a lot throughout this, but it's something that makes Katatonia is such a great band. They are masters of mood, and they are able to corroborate this with strong songwriting as well as poignant lyricism. This is still a band that was early in their transitional cycle. They were only a couple of albums in, and we would see that this band would be able to do some great things in their future based off of the groundwork that was laid by albums such as Tonight's Decision. But what really puts it over the top, what makes it the true album that I continuously go back to, is just that idea. It is an album that feels very simple to return to. It has a lot of replay value, and it has a ton that is going for it whenever it comes to keeping along with the memory. It stays with you. You hear yourself humming some of these ideas, which sounds odd for a metal band, but we're metal fans, makes sense. Not to mention, you will sometimes just be walking around or just doing something and immediately think of one of these songs and immediately want to rush home and listen to it. It has that kind of magnetic appeal, and that's why it's #1 on this list. But what's your list? I want to see that in the comments box below. I know we've had a lot of rank-em-alls this week. It's been fun. We have a couple more left, and we are going to talk about them next. But thank you very much for watching. Show me your list in the comments box below. I'm CoverkillerNation, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Go listen to some Katatonia. Take care.